You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Shalom, and welcome to another episode of SLA Insights. This is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and I'm going to be presenting today another factor that's going to influence vocabulary learning and retention, and that is creative use of the vocabulary item. Now, we've been talking about vocabulary and vocabulary acquisition and the importance of that for reading fluency. We've talked about aspects of knowing a word, what it means to know a word in multiple facets. And we've been now in the middle of looking at various factors that are going to affect, and in most cases improve, vocabulary learning and retention. I covered 3 of these in previous episodes. And today, as I said, I'm going to cover creative use or creative processing of the vocabulary item to help with learning. Now, the factors that I've covered already have been motivation, noticing, and retrieval. And so today I will cover the creative use of vocabulary. And then the next episode, I'm going to talk about interference and how that can actually impede learning. So along with simple retrieval, repeated retrieval, which is what I covered in the last episode, creative processing of the word is another factor that's going to affect and, again, improve vocabulary learning and retention. It deepens and enriches vocabulary knowledge. According to ISP Nation, who's kind of the learning vocab in a second language guru, he explains creative processing this way. He says, creative processing occurs when previously met words are subsequently met or used in ways that differ from the previous meeting with the word. At its most striking, the new meeting with the word forces learners to reconceptualize their knowledge of that word. End quote. All right, so creative processing might involve looking at the word from a new perspective, or using a picture or an object or a video to learn the word. It might involve hearing the word instead of reading it, or speaking it instead of writing it. It could also mean looking at the word from different aspects. For example, different inflections, different collocations, different grammatical or syntactical contexts, looking at its references, different meanings of the word, and so on. And the reason this works, the reason that creative processing works, is that it can improve the likelihood of retrieval by your brain creating multiple memory cues for that particular word as it's conceptualized in different ways. So in other words, if you only have one memory trace, it's going to be the memory trace, that is the actual memory itself in the brain. If you have more cues leading to that memory trace, it's going to be more richly encoded with more memory cues attached to it. So if one breaks down, you've got many others with which you can access that memory. So creative processing then creates those multiple memory cues that will lead to the memory trace, again, making it more likely for retrieval to happen if and when it becomes necessary. Creative processing is also going to often result in mental or semantic elaboration. In other words, your brain is spending more time pondering it, thinking about it, working on it, which is going to deepen and enrich the level of processing of the word and also make retention and retrieval more likely. Again, it's laying more memory cues to get to that memory trace in the brain. So how can you encourage, in a practical sense, how can you encourage the creative use or creative processing of a particular vocabulary item? How can you increase the variety of exposures, not just the number of exposures, but the variety of exposures to the various vocabulary items? Well, first of all, we can talk about using multiple language skills, not just reading, but also hearing, speaking, writing. So if I were to use in Hebrew, for example, the verb yashav, which at its basic meaning is to sit, but it's a very common word and has a rather broad range of meaning, or rather broad semantic range. And so using it in different modes, speaking, listening, hearing, writing, is going to create multiple cues for yashav. But you may also want to use multiple modes, for example, not just text-based, but visual aids, maybe props, maybe photos, maybe videos, maybe somebody acting it out as a way of connecting that word, that form, with its meaning, and thereby you're actually skipping the native language, the L1. You're going right from the Hebrew word, the L2 word, to its meaning without going through translation, which can be a more direct and effective, efficient way of learning the word. You may also want to study different aspects of the word, maybe different grammatical forms, like lashevet is the infinitive construct, which looks quite a bit different from yashav, or imperatives, shave, sit down. You may want to talk about the range of meaning: sit, dwell, wait for, be inhabited, cause to dwell, or collocations: sit on, sit with, sit before, that is to be a disciple, sit or dwell in, or consider alternatives or synonyms and compare, contrast. Consider Isaiah 5:3, where dwellers are in parallel with people. Yashav, participle of yashav, is translated as dwellers, and it's put in synonymous parallelism with people. So that's another way of looking at the word and coming at it from a different perspective. You might also talk about its theological significance with some of these meanings and collocations. For example, when God is seated, using yashav, seated on his throne, what does that indicate? What does that mean? How does that help us understand who God is? So these are just a few examples of how you can add creative use to your vocabulary learning, helping you and or your students to more deeply and thoroughly know that vocabulary item, creating multiple memory cues to that one word to help you retrieve it more easily when the time comes. So again, today we talked about one more factor that affects vocabulary learning and retention, and that is the creative use of the vocabulary item. And the more you do it, the more likely you are to learn or retain the target item. So I've covered now motivation, noticing, retrieval, and creative use of the vocabulary item. The next episode is going to tackle one more factor that's going to affect vocabulary learning, and in this case, negatively, and that is interference. So I hope you can join me. In the meantime, have a great.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.